Hi there, my name's Celine. I'm an artist, a writer, a host, workshop facilitator, and a few other things. And I've been that for quite a while, especially since the 90s. But even as a young child, I was interested in various different subcultures, particularly comics being one of the first ones. But also one of the first things that I took part in was the hip hop movement as it came to Birmingham in the UK, somewhere in the early 80s. It's kind of debated where and when hip hop first left the tri-state area. Some people say it came here 82, 83, 84. But it was around that time when I would first take part in a culture and be hands-on with things. Well, feet on as a dancer first, then a part-time graffiti artist, record buyer, and also much later as an MC. And that is the thing that has sort of allowed me as an MC to see the world, basically. Travel most of Europe, parts of Southeast Asia, East Asia, US, Canada, Australia, parts of North Africa, and many other places, many other cities within that, and all over the UK. So that subculture I set is how I kind of look at the world. I don't look at the world from a Nike big company down. We're always looking up, like you are supposed to be doing this and supposed to be working with the people on the street. So you have the Nike Air Jordan shoe, for example. From what I understand, Jordan doesn't really care particularly about hip hop, and neither does Nike, but the hip hop nation, the hip hop generations have made that shoe into a multi-million pound brand image and iconography. And the Jumpman, Jordan jumping up with the ball, that is definitely an icon within the hip hop generation. So it shows how important, how necessary these cultures are. And within hip hop, as I was just explaining before, that myself coming from a small area called Small Heath, which is my birth point, which at the time was a multi-layered set of cultures. So you had the original English inhabitants of here, but also then white Irish, Pakistani, Indian, various different Caribbean communities, Trinidadian, Bajan, St. Lucian, etc., but also definitely Jamaican. And that's what's been the impetus of me growing up. There was a few Turkish people, a few people of other ethnicities, and that's where we grew up and kind of shared our worldviews and world points. And within that led to a lot of good, but also from the negative of racism, prejudice coming down, not only from some of the inhabitants outside of these mixed and multicultural areas, but also from the police as well. So we always saw our own little communities, our own little things to do, whether that be blues parties, whether that be raves in the late 80s and onwards, or whether that be the hip hop community itself, and onto modern things such as grime and dubstep and drill and things of that nature. So growing up within central Birmingham, and then later on we moved out to areas outside, such as Longbridge. They're very industrial areas, and then eventually they became post-industrial areas as the buildings closed down, the factories closed down or moved to other countries. And we were left with giant buildings everywhere. These buildings were empty, sometimes empty for decades. And young guys and girls, we'd break into these buildings. We'd start spray painting on the walls. We'd start opening things and having raves and blues parties. And basically rave culture came out of that, warehouse culture, which is why it was called that. Warehouse raves were out of that, mostly derelict buildings that weren't being used from all these companies that had moved out or closed down. And in the centre of Birmingham, there's loads of them. On the outskirts where the factories were, there were loads of them as well. And we would use and utilise these. And it's out of that that I come as far as myself seeing how you could use and utilise these spaces and change them from social degradation to social upheaval and forward movement and forward motion for the people. Myself as an artist would come out of these, and one of the most important places, two very important places. One was a place called Bournebrook Park in Selly Oak, which was made legal by members of particularly the graffiti street art community. It wasn't really called street art at that time, but one of those artists, a particular guy, it was one called Cries, and there's another guy called Juice 126. Not this Juice. A lot of people confuse us. He's very important because he was one of the first graffiti artists to kind of change his style to a more abstract style and not be so concerned with letters and characters as graffiti usually is. But those two, they changed that park into a legal graffiti park, and they basically would go to the council, have debates and battles with the police and the council in order to make and facilitate that place to be a legal park in order for people to do graffiti. And that was an important place because they used to have jams there. I would meet groups such as New Flesh for Old, where one of their main members, Part 2, who was also a graffiti artist, producer and a DJ, would turn up there from other parts of the UK, York, London, Bristol and other places. And it became quite a famous place. Around the same time and a little bit later, Digbeth, the same thing happened in Digbeth, but Digbeth being a bigger area as far as its built upness, because Selly Oak is more of a suburban area and Digbeth is more built up. So there were more factories there once upon a time. And a lot of these were empty. A particular one was the Custard Factory, which is very well known now for dances, gigs, pubs, clubs, and trendy nights out. But at the time, it was a derelict building. And these guys, Cries, Juice 126, and many others, Zuki and other people, managed to sometimes get hold of the keys, sometimes illegally occupy the spaces, and would bring in skate ramps and would book hip hop groups from around the country and other countries, and would make jams and drum and bass, hip hop nights, house nights, and eventually that became the spot. And to this point right now, from those early 90s, it's now a thriving place filled with, coffee shops and art house places and studios and graphic designers, offices and things of that nature. Some of that's good, some of it's bad, but it's with those people that started at the street level. It didn't, like I say, it didn't come from up high with all the big business. It came from the ideas of a few young people who would have been seen as maybe outlaws or loutish or vandals or whatnot. But they've made a whole series of areas throughout the city, not only very lucrative, but also very culturally important, and also made a lot of money for different people as well. So that's the interesting thing. And now there are places to go. There's not just derelict buildings. There are art tours and art walks and funding. There is a media school in that same area by the name of BIM.